Hello YouTube, my name's Nana, welcome to my channel, and yes, I am talking about Trayvon Martin. Lastly, I think it's sort of nonsense and silly to try and divorce this case from race. It doesn't really make sense. It's not even just like an opinion thing. Factually, I think we can look at this case and see that it is so closely entwined with race. And it's funny because I feel like the people who are most adamantly trying to divorce race from this case are the people who are at the same time trying to utilize race to their benefit as much as possible. And, that's the defense, that's conservative pundits, that's a lot of people who just are on the side of the defense and refuse to acknowledge race in this case. These people are, a lot of the times, participating in colorblind racism and participating in this idea of, oh, well, if I don't explicitly acknowledge race, then I'm avoiding racism, which isn't true. Participating in colorblind racism means that you ignore power discrepancies and you ignore power dynamics among races in the current moment and then socially and historically, because that's all intertwined. And so just saying, oh, I ignore race doesn't actually help to solve racial issues. It only furthers racial issues. Not to sort of put forward a false dichotomy, but you're not part of a solution, and so you're sort of part of the problem. The idea of being apathetic towards race as a whole means you're ignoring racial differences that still continue to exist. The pre-requirement for colorblindness to actually have the effect of sort of being equal would be if there were no racial inequalities. And so if you believe that, then I suppose it would make sense to take on a colorblind mentality and say, oh, well, I don't look at race and the races are equal, and so therefore it's equal. But that's very untrue. Factually, scientifically, statistically, however you want to look at that, it's not true. For people who deny that, again, as I've said before, I would just say educate yourself. Because it should not always be the job of oppressed people to educate oppressors, passive or active oppressors. So that's what it is. The defense, these conservative pundits, they're using this sort of colorblind racism, and they're trying to divorce the case from race. Yet at the same time, the defense totally relied on race. The defense relied on the same sort of racial profiling that George Zimmerman used and eventually caused him to kill Trayvon Martin. The defense relied on that racial profiling to profile Trayvon Martin as an aggressive young black man and to profile Rachel Jeantel as aggressive and uneducated. And they based their case off of that. And they tried to get credibility from that. And even with the idea of the burglar, that there was a black burglar in the neighborhood earlier, that is explicitly racist. That logic is saying there was a black person who did something bad in this neighborhood. Therefore, it is reasonable to suspect black people in this neighborhood of being suspicious and to confront them and to be afraid of them and to then use that fear to kill them. That is explicitly racist, saying that one black person did something and now you can apply that to every black person you see in this neighborhood. That's explicitly racist. I highly doubt Mark O'Mara and Don West would say it was reasonable that if there were a white burglar in the neighborhood, which I'm sure there has been, it is now reasonable to suspect every single white person who walks in that neighborhood. I highly doubt they would make that argument. Actually, I'm positive they wouldn't. Because it doesn't feed into this stereotypical status quo idea of race. With that point, they were telling the jurors, it's okay for you to bring your racial prejudices into this case. They were inviting them to say, yes, it is reasonable to be scared of young black men, because young black men do bad things. So these people who are trying to deny the cases about race, just like juror B37, so the case wasn't about race at all, we didn't consider it at all. At the same time, they're using race to their benefit as much as possible. And furthermore, I think this case, again, emphasizes how the white-black divide, in terms of race, is often the discourse that takes over in America. Because George Zimmerman, I don't know his exact racial and ethnic background, but he's Hispanic. He's not white. However, I argue that he absolutely was racialized as white in this case, because he was the man claiming to defend himself against an aggressive young black man. And therefore, along the white-black divide, he was made the white figure. And he benefited from that, because being the white figure allowed him to be the safe person, the right person, the good person, the person who was looking out for the neighborhood, the person who didn't have bad things in his heart, whose heart was in the right place. Whereas Trayvon Martin, due to that white-black divide, due to the racialization of being black, he was aggressive. He was dangerous. He shouldn't have been there, and he was suspicious. And therefore, according to that white-black divide, according to those ugly, disgusting messages that are still part of our society, Trayvon Martin was obviously the aggressor, and obviously George Martin had the right to defend himself, because fundamentally, according to that white-black divide, according to what that has socially and historically been in the United States, George Zimmerman was good, and Trayvon Martin was bad. And the idea that Mark O'Mara says, oh, well, if George Zimmerman were black, he wouldn't have been charged at all, is nonsense. I really don't understand where he's coming from with that one. Someone's going to have to explain that to me, because it's nonsense. That black men aren't thought of as violent, that black-on-black crime isn't part of the criminal justice system. I really don't know what he was suggesting there, but it's nonsense. And I've also seen some people floating around this image of, oh, well, Trayvon Martin case, it's got national attention. However, there was a young white man killed by a black man, and it hasn't got national attention. This idea that you want this case to have national attention it's just odd. Because, as I've been mentioning, it takes away the privacy of that person's death, which I think is something that, you would want. Like, it's important for you to mourn over this person. But I don't think people who are mourning think, wow, I really wish the entire nation was involved in my business. The idea that, a young black man's death has taken over the news, as opposed to a young white boy's death at the hands of a black man. I don't really understand how that's supposed to be a legitimate point. Because we know there are many cases where black youths are not given the same attention by police departments, historically, by news media. So the idea that, oh, this one case has, taken over the news, and there's a young white boy who was killed by a black man, and see, he's not getting any attention, that I guess that's supposed to show some sort of reverse racism. I don't quite understand what the point is, but it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense that you're trying to make the argument that I guess this shouldn't have as much importance. And on a sort of basic level, it doesn't, right? Like, the idea that 2 young boys are dead in both of those cases, that's horribly sad. Trayvon Martin's, death is not better or worse than this white boy's death. The attention on this case, again, I think stems from race, this fact that race is so closely intertwined with this case. And the fact that a black man killed a young white boy, in the racial discourse of the U.S., that's not exactly odd. Again, black men are described as aggressive, If a black man were to kill a white person, that's not black people are supposed to be criminals. That's not exactly something that would garner national attention. However, this case, where a young black boy is killed by no fault of his own by a man who was racialized as white due to the circumstances of the case, yes, it garners national attention because a lot of people have felt the reality of race in this case, and have felt the importance of this case and the messages it could send. So again, this idea that somehow this case shouldn't be as important just because of the fact that other young people are dying. Yes, young people are dying all the time in this country, and every time it's sad. People are not trying to argue that Trayvon Martin is more important than those people. People are trying to argue that he's as important, that he should have been afforded the same rights, that he had the right to stand his ground, that he had the right to be there, that he had the right to not be thought of as suspicious simply because of what he was wearing, that he had the right to be regarded as human and equal. So, race is so important in this case, and it's so integral. And trying to divorce it from this case doesn't make sense. It isn't really real. Because again, the people who are trying to divorce it at the same time are using it as much as possible. Ultimately, I think this case is a teachable moment for the realities of race in this country, for the importance of race in this country, and for the resilience of racial issues in this country. And I just hope a lot of people can sort of get something from that, because there's so much that's negative about this case. If we can find some positive, perhaps it's that we at least all educate ourselves a little bit more. Thank you very, very much if you've made it all the way through part 5 of this video series on Trayvon Martin and the Zimmerman trial. I really appreciate it because this was a lot to go through. Make sure to like, dislike, comment, and share and subscribe if you want to support this channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!